Thank you.
Brand new one.
You're the favorite student today.
That new whiteboard smell.
Nothing like
I'm not
that.
gonna lie, I feel like a kid on Christmas when I get new supplies at school because just opening the box and it's all these like markers that are fresh and not drying out. And you're just like, oh, this is the best feeling ever. Alright, so I'll let you guys kind of play along by just kind of writing down what your response might be. You can take a couple minutes and think about it. Some of these are kind of meant to make you think and maybe trick you up a bit, and sometimes the answer might be both. So, fact or myth, alternative high schools are a dumping ground for the riffraff of young society. Fact or myth?
We're supposed to write it down, like hold up our boards or what are you
That's
doing?
right. Just write it down. We'll hold them up. We'll see how many of you think that.
Thank you.
Alright, so myth, 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 myth. Alright, click. Pretty please.
Smell it?
Don't be smelling the dryer. That's another problem I come across sometimes. I can take away like the glue. Alright, now the answer is actually myth. Alternative schools are just what they say in their title. It's supposed to be an alternative form of education that can be offered to students who might struggle in the mainstream high schools. Now, after I learned what alternative education really was, I learned that I am actually an alternative student, and I should have been in alternative education. Schroeder could probably tell you, and Dr. Brackey could tell you, I was a little bit left of center, and I learned differently. And that's kind of how it went, and that's sometimes how it goes. If you want to go ahead and go to the next slide. The truth about alternative high school students is, unfortunately, when you're in a mainstream school and your needs aren't being met, what are these kids going to do? They're going to act out, they're going to be bad, they're going to lash out in inappropriate ways, and they get kind of falsely labeled as being the bad kids because of that. So what alternative schools do is they provide a different learning environment to accommodate the needs of those special students. A couple things Kimberly Center in particular offers. We have smaller class sizes. There are at max 15 kids in my class. How many kids did you guys have in your classes?
Between 29 and 30.
Yeah, that should not happen. Ever. You should never have that many kids in a classroom. That's how kids get lost and go under the radar like that. And that's where these alternative kids get lost because they just become a number. So, with a smaller class size, 1 teacher to 15 kids, I know when my kids aren't showing up, and we only have about 250 kids in the whole school, so I know when I've seen them in the morning, and they haven't shown up to 4th hour, and I'm like, maybe they're taking an extra long smoke break, and I can call them out on it later. Differentiated instruction, I get to have a little more freedom in how I get content across to my students because they need that. A lot of them need that one-on-one, super individualized attention because they need to feel special. They need to feel like they matter to that teacher. We also have alternative class offerings and hands-on classroom management. With the alternative class offerings, with Kimberly Center especially, we offer classes that no one else in the Davenport district offers, and I'll get into that a little bit later. With the hands-on classroom management, you get to do a lot more hands-on learning. This is easier for me because I teach art, so yeah, a lot of my stuff is going to be more hands-on, but you could make this work for like English or math or history, or whatever subject matter you're teaching, because you have the opportunity to really get in depth, do a lot more like role play exercises, more read aloud type stuff, get them more involved so that they can feel more included, create more of a community environment. All right, go ahead. And does anyone have any questions so far? No? You're free to stop me at any time. Now, the other thing you want to consider is that there's different types of alternative schooling. There's not just the alternative schools where, you know, the bad kids go. If you want to click through, I mean, there's private religiously affiliated schools. That's a type of alternative education. One example we have in the Quad Cities is Almond High School. It's Catholic, I believe? Yeah. Then there's charter schools. How many of you have seen Waiting for Superman? Most of you? Okay, if you haven't, please see it. It is an excellent documentary. KIPP is one of the charter schools that's featured in this documentary, and it's a charter it's a charter school, which is a type of alternative education. And then there's IMSA, which is the Illinois Math and Science Academy, and that's alternative education too, because it focuses more on just math and science, so special education in that regard. Then there's also still same-sex boarding schools in existence, and that's alternative education as well. So Salem Academy and Westover School are two of the more well-known ones, I believe, particularly Westover. They really prepare you for leadership roles and all of that. Go ahead. So the next one, fact or myth. You can only attend an alternative school if you get kicked out of your home school. Oh, I like the happy face. Thank you. Okay, everyone said myth. Now the answer to this is actually both. And I'll tell you why it's both. Some alternative schools work this way, but that's not how they should be working, and that needs to change. And the only way it's going to change is if we speak up and speak out against it. Go ahead. With the Kimberly Center, we used to be a school where kids would get kicked out of their home school and they'd be kind of dumped at the Kimberly Center. So 3 years ago, it was a very different learning environment than what it is now. We were getting a lot of like the gangbanger kids and the people who were dropping out and having babies left and right at a very young age. Nowadays, you actually have to apply to get into the Kimberly Center. You have to fill out an application. There's an extensive interview process, and then you have a 2-week probationary period. And what happens during that period is you have to have no unexcused absences, no tardies, and no behavior referrals for that 2 weeks. Otherwise, you're automatically sent back to your home school, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So you actually have to want to come to this school. And because our students now actually want to come to this school and get a good education, we've had a very different influx of students. A lot of the kids I work with now, I have a lot of LGBT students who got bullied really bad in their mainstream school. So I have 2 female to male students right now and 3 male to female, which is a very high number for a high school. I didn't even have any transgendered classmates when I was going to high school, so it's a very new phenomena. And it's very eye-opening as well, especially with our older staff, to kind of become more accepting and understand diversity. With the private schools and charter schools as well, you also have an extensive application process and a lot of times tuition. So alternative schooling, you don't always just get dumped there because your main high school didn't want you anymore. You have to apply and actually want to be there. Okay. Next fact or myth. Alternative students get good grades because classes are easier and teachers do the work for them. All right, go ahead. Yes, that is indeed, ain't no such thing, a myth. Students are more successful because the classes are catered to meet their needs. No, we do not sit there and do the work for the students. The counselors don't sit there and do the work for the students. They actually have to learn things on their own, but their instruction is differentiated. Case in point, I have this student who is just adorable. I like this guy. And he is very odd. He isn't necessarily special needs or anything, but he likes to talk in little voices. He likes to talk like this and go, "Hey guys," so just because. And he did not do work in any of his other classes. He just kind of like sat there and, you can come on in if you want. He just kind of sat there and just took it all in and was very smart, could ace the test, but didn't do any of the work in class, so he'd always fail. Then I discovered, I have him for painting, he really likes to splatter paint. A lot. He likes to just hold the paper right there and flick paint all over it. So what I did was I said, "Hey, you're not doing any of the other projects. So here's the deal I'm going to make you. I'll give you a D-, so you'll pass. You're not doing the exact work everyone else is doing, but you can have a passing grade. But what you're going to do is you're going to take my art gallery board up there, and you are going to do a bunch of splatter paints, and then we're going to cut them out into shapes and collage them across the gallery board. He loved it. It was the happiest I'd ever seen him. This kid was sitting in the back of my room for 2 weeks, just flinging paint at paper, getting super into it. Now I'm teaching him how to do drip art, and he's like obsessively in love with Jackson Pollock. So there is a way to reach these kids and work with them to make them learn something. It might not exactly be, the tried and true curriculum that you need to stick with, but you can get these things across to them and make them learn these valuable concepts and have that flexibility, which is really important to alternative education. And that's why I really encourage you guys to do that, so you can learn, no, you don't have to stick with the rigid syllabus. You can make these little accommodations for these kids. Go ahead. Alternative classes for kids that at least Kimberly Center offers. Apex Credit Recovery. Have you guys ever heard of Apex or worked with it at your schools? Okay. This is a really neat and kind of recent thing. What Apex does is you have the option to take a class online if you fail it, and that way you can learn at your own pace, you can take the test, and then you can get the high school credit for it. And a lot of our students who dropped out and then came back later, there are re-engagement kids, choose to do all Apex classes. They never actually come to a main classroom setting, and they can still get their high school diploma because that's just what they need to learn. They need to sit in front of a computer and kind of do it at their own pace. Proficiency-based classes, we're actually thinking about moving into this. Instead of an A through F grade scale, it's did you meet proficiency, which would be excellent for the cases of my little guy who likes to splatter paint. He's proficient, he knows what he's doing, he's really interested in this particular area of painting, but we don't have to grade him on an A through F basis, because why shouldn't he be able to get as good a grade as a kid who is doing landscapes and all that? It's just a different kind of art, in my opinion. And dual credit classes. A lot of high schools offer this. Kimberly Center is offering this now. You can get high school credit and college credit. Case managers. This was a really neat thing we got through our grant that we got a few years ago. We have case managers who basically keep on these students who are a little more problematic, have a lot of trouble getting to school. They can come and pick them up. They can ride the city bus with them, teach them how to ride the city bus, they do a lot of home visits and stuff like that, make sure they're getting their grades up and their stuff turned in. We also have a career coordinator. With alternative school, a lot of these kids, they're not going off to a four-year university like this. That's the sad truth. They're probably not going to. But they might be, beauticians or makeup artists or mechanics or all these other valuable things that we need to function in society. So it's no less important. So we have this career coordinator who comes in and brings in these people from like mechanical schools, IT schools, and they talk to these kids about what they could do for their future that isn't necessarily going to a four-year university. And then a couple classes we offer, this goes back to the alternative course offerings. I teach Japanese anime. Japan anime cosplay was like a big passion of mine for a long time, still is. And I have a lot of kids, especially my kids on the autism spectrum, who absolutely love this stuff. So I have that as kind of an offering for them to kind of get them more involved in art and social studies too, because they learn a little bit about Japanese culture. We also have a home maintenance class that our industrial tech teacher offers, and he teaches students how to build homes, how to fix things that go wrong in your home or your apartment and all that, so it's really good life skills. All right, another factor myth. Alternative students always have poor home lives and are too weird to fit in. You never even erased your board line.
Never do.
Nope. Ain't no thing. Or ain't no truth, or...
Ain't no such thing.
Oh, ain't no such thing, okay. I've been learning my students' lingo a little bit, too. I learned what ratchet means.
Oh yeah, that's a great one.
It's not a tool, so they'll be like, Miss Gillette, does this look ratchet? And I'll be like, it's a little ratchet, we can make it better. And they love it, because I sound very, very white.
Yep.
Go ahead. This is mostly myth. I would be lying if I said, my students aren't a little, they're left of center, but that's okay. I like the left of center kids. I have a soft personal spot in my heart for them. Alternative kids come from all sorts of backgrounds and walks of life, just like any type of student. Really, how are they any different from the kids you're going to see in a mainstream classroom? You're going to have rich kids, you're going to have poor kids, you're going to have kids right in the middle. It's not the student's life that makes them alternative, it's their learning style. And that's the thing I want you guys to take away from this. If that's the one thing you have to take away from this, it's not their life, it's their learning style. Go ahead. One more, if you teach in an alternative setting, you will just be pushing kids through. Pushing them through to graduate. Diploma Factory. Again, myth. These kids are held to the exact same standard as any mainstream high school student is. Because the fact of the matter is, when you work for a district, you've got standards that you need to meet. They have to be proficient in certain things in order to graduate. Now, I am blessed in the fact that I teach art and I have a little bit more flexibility than, say, English. Because they're going to have to read certain things, they're going to have to get through certain things they might not necessarily enjoy. But you get to be a little more flexible in how you go about teaching it, which is the important part. And you don't just push kids through. You don't just give them the easy A so that they can get the credit. They actually have to do work for it. Okay? So what I want to do to kind of wrap this up in the last 10-ish minutes, I want you guys to kind of do a think, pair, share at your tables, and this kind of works out because you're all evenly paired. What were your first impressions of alternative education and how have they changed since this presentation? Is there anything you want to know that wasn't previously covered? I'll hang around for a little bit if you guys have questions. And after looking at this information, do you consider yourself alternative? Because I personally do. After working here for 3 years, I was an alternative kid. And there's no shame in that. I wear that title with pride. So go ahead and talk about that. My district. Yeah.
Okay, so is there, like, in applying to an alternative school, is it any, like, is the application process any different?
You have to fill out kind of an application. I think it's a general, like, to get your background and your transcripts, see how many credits you have, what you're lacking. For some students, like, if they're 18 years old and they have 4 credits, I mean, there's not really a chance you're gonna get those credits you need to graduate before you turn 21. But we also do, one of the main things we do is like the interview process, and it's where our principal sits down with you and she basically grills you and says, okay, why do you want to be here? Why should we accept you into this school? Why do you think you should be here? And kind of get their honest thoughts and answers, because we want to see more about like how honest they can be when being spoken to versus what they can just write down on paper.
What about when you're like applying for a job there?
When you apply for a job?
Yeah.
I kind of got lucky. I was actually supposed to work at J.B. Young originally, and the principal, who is at Kimberly Center now, she was the principal where I student taught at Madison. So she knew me, she had given me a mock interview at Madison before, and she saw that I had been hired by J.B. Young half-time and wanted to snatch me up before I signed a contract with them because she was going over to Kimberly Center. So she interviewed me for full-time, basically called me an hour later and said I got the job. So, yeah, I kind of had a special circumstance placement, but if you guys want to apply to Davenport schools, you would fill out their general application that you get to online. I forget what that website is where you can look for the different teaching jobs, but fill out any Davenport thing. They don't always hire a lot of outside teachers. They might soon in the next coming years because we're going to have a lot of people retiring. But for now what they do is kind of a bid system. So if they have a teacher who's leaving a building, they'll have you bid in. So any teacher who wants to switch schools based on their seniority can bid into that school. So they kind of do it that way, and if it's never filled, then they open it up to outside stuff. But sorry, I don't know a lot about like the school district application thing, because like I said, it was kind of a random happenstance that I got hired right away.
Which is super awesome.
Yeah, which is very, I feel very blessed, but I'm not complaining about that, but it doesn't happen for everyone else, unfortunately.
How many schools have you applied to?
I applied to over 30. I applied to KIPP down in Texas to go there. I applied to a lot of Chicago suburb schools. I was not getting anything for the longest time. I got hired on in July. I was convinced I was going to be working at a daycare in Aurora, as my first job straight out of college, so got lucky there. But yeah, don't give up is all I can say. Something will eventually come along. I had to fill out a lot of applications. Everyone does. Teaching jobs are not very easy to get.
We were just at another classroom actually, and some girl actually had her Excel worksheet and scrolled down through it, and there's like a ton of schools, and I'm like, oh. Yeah. Suddenly I felt very small.
Yep. But a ton of schools mean a lot of chances too. So some people get lucky right away. Some people it takes a little while. My best friend just got her first teaching job up in Jacksonville, Illinois, and she took her like 2 years of filling out applications before she got that. So just keep at it. Don't give up. I know it's hard. Any other questions? Let's get some of your responses really quick from your Think, Pair, Share. How about you guys? High school student too, so this will be interesting.
What I said is that I never looked at as an alternative school as like just a bad school. Like, I guess I looked at it as easier because in our yearbook they have a page for our alternative school, and they like always had like they're playing games, and they have like a foosball table and like the nicest computers, and we're just kind of sitting at our old desktop computers like, how do we do this? Because it's broken and we don't have a foosball table. But the presentation changed my mind about how to perceive them.
Cool. How about you guys?
Well, because from my understanding before the presentation, I was like, well, you know, alternative schools kind of like where the bad kids go, and like when they can't, like when they ditch school a lot, and suddenly teachers can't deal with that. That's when they approach the principal, and they're like, well, we can't deal with this. So then they get sent over there, and that's just what my understanding was before this presentation, and now we know it's completely different.
Awesome. Yay. You guys?
Well, like personally, I didn't know a lot about alternative education. I can't ever recall there ever being one in the school district that I was in. And I feel like this is a great opportunity for those students that are a little, like you said, a little left of center, to kind of find themselves and also be who they are as a person, and also be able to learn the same ways that other mainstream kids would. So.
Awesome. Well, I sincerely hope you guys enjoyed this. I will hand the reins over to this lovely young lady, but I will be around for a little bit after her presentation if you guys have any questions for me or want to know anything further. So thank you.